It started with a smirk on a late-night talk show. Governor Gavin Newsom, polished as ever, leaned back in his seat during an interview with a celebrity host, brushing off a question about the growing discontent from former Trump officials. With a wave of his hand and a smug grin, he delivered the line that lit the political world on fire. Kash Patel? Please. If I wanted legal advice from a conspiracy theorist, I'd check Twitter. The audience laughed. The host chuckled. The internet exploded. Within hours, Patel was trending, but not with shame. His supporters, constitutional conservatives and veterans alike, rallied around him. Thousands of posts swarmed X, formerly Twitter, demanding Newsom debate him directly. The call was loud, and it reached Patel before dawn. At 6:04 a.m., his response came in a single post. "Careful, Governor. Mocking from a safe distance is easy. Face me on stage if you're not afraid of facts." The message went viral. By noon, the hashtag #FaceCashLive trended globally. Political commentators took sides. Some mocked Patel's boldness. Others warned Newsom, "You're poking a former national security prosecutor who doesn't flinch." Newsom, ever the strategist, dismissed the challenge at first. "I don't waste time with political stuntmen," he said during a press Q&A in Sacramento. "I have a state to run." But by week's end, the pressure mounted. The DNC remained silent. His PR team began to sweat. And then came the booking. CNN Prime Debate Special, America's Future Face to Face, starring Governor Gavin Newsom versus Kash Patel, moderated by Jake Tapper. Location, New York Public Forum Theater, live audience, no teleprompters, just 90 minutes of raw, unfiltered combat. Newsom agreed reluctantly, believing he could dominate the moment with poise and polish. He rehearsed sound bites, dug into Patel's past. His team built a digital campaign around the phrase, "Expose the extremist." Meanwhile, Patel prepared in silence. No interviews, no public appearances. He read court briefs, studied Newsom's economic record, his COVID decisions, and the rising crime rates in San Francisco. He knew this wouldn't just be a battle of facts, it would be a war of perception. The night before the debate, Patel posted a single line. "Tomorrow the governor won't meet a conspiracy theorist. He'll meet the truth, face to face." No hashtags, no emojis, just a storm brewing. Across the country, Americans booked watch parties. From Rust Belt diners to West Coast college lounges, everyone wanted to see one thing. Could the polished politician survive a head-on collision with the man they tried to ridicule? And deep down, even Gavin Newsom began to feel it, that sinking sensation that he may have underestimated the wrong man. The theater was electric. Red, white, and blue lights bathed the audience as camera crews adjusted lenses and murmurs filled the air. Security detail lined the aisles while press boxes overflowed with commentators whispering predictions. But everyone fell silent when the stage light shifted and the moderator's voice rang out, "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to tonight's debate special, America's Future Face to Face." Jake Tapper, cool and composed, took the podium. He wasted no time. "Let's meet our guests. California Governor Gavin Newsom." A wave of applause, sharp and rehearsed. Newsom stepped out, smile measured, hair perfectly set, dark blue suit tailored to cinematic perfection. "And former Chief of Staff to the Secretary of Defense, Mr. Kash Patel." A deeper, more unpredictable applause followed. Some cheers, some jeers, but louder, more raw. Patel walked out in a plain gray blazer, black shirt, no tie. Eyes locked forward, no wave, no grin. This wasn't theater for him. It was war. They sat. Tapper opened. "Governor Newsom, last week you made a dismissive remark about Mr. Patel. Tonight you face him directly. Would you like to start with a clarification?" Newsom leaned forward, palms up, the picture of smug diplomacy. "Jake, I believe in facts. I believe in responsible governance. What I said was in response to a growing movement of misinformation. I stand by it. He glanced at Patel mockingly. "And I'm here tonight to remind America what's real and what's reckless." Polite applause. Tapper turned. "Mr. Patel?" Kash didn't move for a second. Then he adjusted the mic. "Governor, you've spent your career polishing your image and dodging accountability. I'm not here to argue your branding. I'm here to rip off the mask." That line landed. Audible gasps, a few cheers. Newsom's brow twitched. "You mock national security professionals from behind a podium. You label dissent as extremism. But let's ask the businesses that fled your state, who's reckless?" Newsom tried to interject, but Patel cut through. "Let's ask the families who lost everything under your lockdowns, or the shop owners bankrupted while your political donors got carve-outs." The crowd shifted, leaned in. Tapper blinked. "Governor Newsom, would you like to respond?" Newsom smirked again, but it was tighter this time. "I'll remind Mr. Patel that being loud isn't the same as being right. I make decisions based on public health, not political noise." Patel didn't blink. "You make decisions based on optics and poll numbers. California's economy didn't collapse from disease. It collapsed from your arrogance." Boom! The audience buzzed. Tapper raised his hand for calm, but Newsom's smile was gone. His shoulders stiffened. His next words carried edge. "It's easy to criticize from the outside, Kash. Governing isn't courtroom drama, it's responsibility." Patel leaned in, voice low but lethal. "Then take responsibility for the homeless crisis on your streets, for the exodus from your cities, for the needles in playgrounds and the crime in daylight." Dead silence. Tapper looked stunned. Newsom's fingers tapped the table, and Patel finished the round with the calmest words yet. "You wanted to humiliate me. You brought a knife to a courtroom fight, Governor." He sat back, and America couldn't look away. The first round rattled Newsom more than he expected. Backstage, his advisors were already texting, "Stay calm, pivot to policy, don't let him dictate tone." But Gavin wasn't used to this kind of opponent. Most political adversaries sparred within the boundaries of rhetoric. Patel didn't. He didn't soften punches. He delivered them surgically, like cross-examination in a federal court. Tapper transitioned. "Let's shift to national influence. Governor, you've been mentioned as a potential presidential contender. What's your response to critics who say your leadership record disqualifies you?" Newsom forced a chuckle, brushing invisible lint from his sleeve. "Jake, that's a narrative pushed by right-wing media. California leads the nation in innovation, clean energy, and diversity. My record stands strong." He turned to Patel. "And I won't take governance lessons from someone who worked under an administration defined by chaos." Kash nodded slightly, as if inviting the jab. Tapper looked to him, but Newsom continued, this time stepping over the line. "Let's be honest. Kash Patel is the kind of guy who'd rather carry water for authoritarian figures than defend American values. That's the real extremism." Gasps rippled through the theater. Tapper's eyes widened. Patel raised an eyebrow but stayed silent for a beat. Then, calmly, "You just accused a son of immigrants, a first-generation American who prosecuted terrorists and served this country in uniformed and civilian capacities, of betraying American values." His voice didn't rise. That made it worse. "All because I made you uncomfortable." Tapper tried to pivot. "Let's move to immigration policy." But Patel cut in. "No. Let's finish this thought. You want to talk betrayal? Let's talk about your silence during the riots in your own state. Let's talk about sanctuary cities shielding violent offenders. Let's talk about ICE agents who had to work around your orders just to do their jobs." Newsom shifted in his seat. He tried to laugh, but the sound fell flat. "This is political theater." "No," Patel snapped, the steel now audible. "This is truth, and I won't let you brand it as extremism just because it's inconvenient." The audience erupted, not in full cheers, but the sharp murmur of shifting energy. Newsom looked off stage for a second too long, and Patel seized the opening. You came here thinking you could bully me into silence. You brought smugness and sound bites. But you forgot the one thing I always bring, receipts. He reached into his blazer and pulled out a printed document, public records from Newsom's administration detailing pandemic-era waiver grants for big donors while small businesses suffered. He placed it gently on the table between them. You locked down the poor and privileged your friends. Tell me again about values, Governor. Newsom's mouth opened, but no words came. Tapper looked stunned. The audience leaned forward. A pause. And Patel, soft-spoken but deadly. The only thing more dangerous than your arrogance is how far you think it'll carry you. The energy in the room was no longer neutral. Until now, the audience had come to witness a clash, maybe even a takedown. Many arrived expecting Gavin Newsom, the sharp-tongued, camera-trained governor, to walk circles around the controversial Trump-era staffer. But now, the mood had changed. Phones were out. Clips were already hitting social media. TikTok had a snippet of Kash Patel laying out waiver records. It had been up for 6 minutes and already had 500,000 views with the caption, "He brought the proof." Tapper tried to steer the conversation back. Let's talk public safety. Governor Newsom, crime in California has become a focal point of criticism, especially in major cities. What's your response? Newsom straightened, trying to recover. Jake, this narrative that crime is out of control is exaggerated and often fueled by fear-mongering. In reality, California has made incredible strides in reform and rehabilitation. Patel leaned forward, sharp but measured. Tell that to the families of victims in San Francisco and Los Angeles. Tell that to the Walgreens stores that closed down because of repeated theft. Newsom tried to retort, a few isolated incidents do not define a state. Patel, eyes locked. You called it isolated. That's exactly the problem. You don't see what's real. Or worse, you do, and you just don't care. The room pulsed again. The audience didn't cheer, but they didn't boo either. There was tension now. Not showbiz tension, truth tension. Newsom looked sideways, swallowing slightly. He tried to pivot. Let's not pretend Mr. Patel represents working-class Americans. He's been in the swamp longer than most. That was a mistake. Patel didn't even flinch. My father drove a taxi in Queens for 35 years. My mother worked at a gas station to put food on the table. I didn't come from wine caves and donor galas. I came from dirt, Governor, and I earned every inch of ground I stand on. The applause that followed wasn't wild, but it was real. People clapped not for spectacle, but for sincerity. Tapper paused. He could feel it too. Gentlemen, let's cool the temperature. But the stage was already warm. Newsom's armor was cracking. You know what people hate more than extremism? Patel said, soft but slicing. Elitism pretending to be virtue. Newsom blinked. Kash let the silence speak. And in homes across America, viewers stared at their screens with a growing realization. Maybe Patel wasn't the villain in the room. Gavin Newsom had always prided himself on staying composed. He could navigate tough interviews, flip hostile questions, and dazzle cameras with a smile, even when cornered. But none of that was working tonight. Because this wasn't politics as usual. This was war, and Kash Patel was not playing defense. The moderator, Jake Tapper, could feel the friction in the air. The teleprompter feed was now useless. There was no room for scripted transitions. He looked from Newsom to Patel and back again. Let's turn to transparency. Governor, your critics accuse you of prioritizing narrative over substance. Is that fair? Newsom didn't answer Tapper directly. He turned toward Patel instead. You want to lecture me on narrative? You, who helped orchestrate one of the most chaotic conspiratorial eras in modern government? You sat next to power while democracy was dragged through the mud. It was meant to land like a hammer. Instead, it sounded defensive. Patel's face remained unreadable. Governor, don't confuse proximity with responsibility. Unlike you, I wasn't holding a mic for the media. I was holding the line while people like you played PR games with national security." Newsom interrupted, his voice rising for the first time. "You helped enable the erosion of public trust. You still defend a man who nearly dismantled this country's institutions." He was losing his cool. Patel didn't even blink. Public trust wasn't lost because people told hard truths. It was lost because people like you denied reality to protect your image. That stung. Newsom leaned forward, voice sharp. "You think you're some kind of patriot?" Patel calmly answered, "No, I know I am." For the first time, Gavin Newsom banged his fist on the desk, not hard, but enough to echo into the microphone. The moderator flinched. "You represent division. You thrive on chaos." Patel responded, voice like steel. "No, Governor, I just don't dress failure in expensive suits and call it leadership." That line broke the room. Half the audience gasped. The other half clapped, loudly. Even Tapper couldn't hide the shift. Newsom's face flushed. He pulled at his collar. His responses got shorter, choppier. Rehearsed lines turned to rambling justifications. California is a model of progress, and this guy wants to take us backwards." Patel didn't even need to interrupt. He just sat there. Because the unraveling was happening on its own. One camera cut to a woman in the audience covering her mouth, clearly shocked. Another showed a young man nodding slowly. The crowd wasn't watching a debate anymore. They were watching a takedown. Tapper finally stepped in. "Gentlemen, we need to maintain order," but Patel already had. With nothing but facts and composure, he had done what no one on that stage expected. He made Gavin Newsom lose control. It wasn't just that Gavin Newsom had lost control. It was that Kash Patel knew it. And now he was turning that weakness into a weapon. He didn't gloat. He didn't shout. He simply leaned forward with the calm of a man who had waited patiently for this exact moment. "Let me explain something to you, Governor," he said, his tone measured. "You think you're the adult in the room because you talk like a professor and dress like a senator. But leadership isn't about aesthetics. It's about truth under pressure, and you're cracking." Newsom tried to interrupt, but Patel didn't stop. "You want to paint me as the dangerous one? Fine. Let's talk about what danger really looks like. Danger is locking kids out of schools while sending your own to private classrooms. Danger is enforcing mandates while dining maskless at the French Laundry." Gasps again. "Danger," Patel continued, "is telling the working class to shut up and suffer while you pose on magazine covers. You don't lead California. You narrate it. You build illusion, not policy." The audience started clapping again, louder this time, even a few standing. Newsom blinked at the crowd, as if trying to recalibrate the room. But it was gone, slipped through his fingers like sand. Tapper tried to regain focus. "Let's return to federal implications." Patel raised a finger, not to Tapper, but to the room. "Before we move on, I have a question. For every voter watching this." The audience hushed instantly. "Ask yourself, who's fighting for your freedom and who's branding your concern as extremism? Who listens to your fears and who silences them with elitist condescension?" He turned to Newsom again. "You thought you were walking into a scripted TV moment, but this isn't a Netflix monologue. This is real America, and tonight they see you." Newsom's lips parted. No words came, and Patel kept going. "You talk about preserving democracy. But let me ask, what part of democracy silences parents at school board meetings? What part criminalizes speech it doesn't like? That's not democracy, Governor. That's control." The audience erupted. It was no longer a polite political crowd. It was a live wire. Backstage, Newsom's team knew it. He was bleeding out. The optics were catastrophic. A rising GOP name was humiliating a top Democrat contender on live national television, and doing it with poise, facts, and discipline. Kash Patel wasn't just holding his ground anymore. He was rewriting it. And as Gavin Newsom sat in silence, eyes narrowing, jaw clenched, it was clear. The man who came to crush had just been crushed by the one he tried to humiliate. As the debate segment closed, Jake Tapper attempted to reset the tone, but the damage had already been done. Kash Patel sat like a statue, silent, composed, eyes locked forward, while Gavin Newsom shifted in his seat, adjusting his sleeve, licking dry lips, struggling to recover what little dignity remained. But outside the studio, the firestorm had already begun. Social media detonated. The moment Patel slid the waiver documents across the table, calling Newsom out for pandemic-era hypocrisy had been clipped, subtitled, and shared on X, TikTok, YouTube Shorts, and Instagram Reels millions of times. He came with files. This wasn't a debate. It was a masterclass. Newsom got lawyered live. The hashtags saw Patel destroys Newsom were live takedown, and Truth Overspin began trending within 20 minutes. Fox News broke into their primetime broadcast to replay the confrontation in full, labeling it the moment the Democrat narrative collapsed. Even on traditionally left-leaning platforms like MSNBC, the response wasn't denial. It was concern. Patel didn't just win, Rachel Maddow said on a special segment, visibly frustrated. He connected in a way Newsom never saw coming. In Sacramento, Newsom's staff were scrambling. Messages flooded campaign inboxes. Major donors were calling, not in panic, but in cold disappointment. One text leaked, "Pull him from national exposure. He's not ready." Meanwhile, Patel's camp was silent, and smartly so. They didn't spike the football, no gloating tweets, no press conference, just clips and one quiet post from Patel himself. Truth doesn't need theatrics, just light. It was short, it was clean, and it landed harder than 1,000 talking points. On the streets of Middle America, in diners, barbershops, on commuter trains and college campuses, people watched and rewatched. Because this wasn't just a man defending his name. It was a man who fought back and won without ever raising his voice. And the contrast was brutal. Newsom, so long framed as the media-savvy golden boy of the left, had crumbled under a man they'd tried to paint as radical. But Patel hadn't played into the stereotype. He was calm. He was sharp. And most damning of all, he was right. As dawn broke on the following day, national headlines reflected the seismic shift. Kash Patel goes viral. The night everything changed. Newsom versus reality, a loss the Democrats didn't expect. The GOP just found their closer. Inside conservative circles, one narrative now reigned. They tried to shame him. He made them regret it. Behind closed doors in Sacramento and D.C., the mood was not just tense, it was radioactive. The morning after the debate, Gavin Newsom entered his office at the Capitol with clenched teeth and zero appetite for small talk. His aides stood frozen, eyes glued to their iPads and phones, monitoring headlines that refused to die down. CNN's homepage screamed, "Newsom melts down as Patel brings receipts live on air." Even the Washington Post editorial board, usually his safe harbor, issued a rare rebuke. The governor entered the arena with too much pride and too little preparation. Donor groups held emergency Zoom calls. "We backed him for 2028, one Silicon Valley financier said. "Now I don't know if he'll survive past Thanksgiving." It wasn't just about one bad night. It was about what Kash Patel exposed, the polished surface of Newsom's persona, stripped clean under pressure. And that kind of authenticity, or lack of it, sticks with voters. Meanwhile, in D.C., conservative operatives were quietly celebrating. Steve Scalise grinned as he read through the trending hashtags. A leaked message from one GOP strategist said, "Patel just did to Newsom what DeSantis failed to do to anyone," and former President Trump, he couldn't resist. He posted on Truth Social, "Kash Patel, strong, smart, and dominant, crushed Gavin like a bug." The meme machine went into overdrive. A viral image showed Patel calmly placing the waiver file on the desk with the caption, "This is how you dismantle a narrative." Others weren't as gentle. One GIF looped Newsom's flinch over and over, while the overlay read, "The exact moment Gavin knew he screwed up." Inside Patel's own team, though, there was no celebration, no champagne, no backpatting, just a quiet, focused debrief. "We didn't win a debate," his communications director said. "We won a moment. Let's not waste it." Kash himself was even calmer than usual. He declined all major interview requests. Instead, he met with military veterans and law enforcement officers behind the scenes. The message was clear: stay grounded, let the performance speak, and it was speaking loudly. In the following days, Patel's book pre-orders skyrocketed. His old speeches were uploaded and dissected online. Podcasts from left and right invited him, though he declined most. The mystery made it worse for Newsom. When you're defeated by a man who doesn't even gloat, your loss lingers longer. DC insiders began murmuring something that sent shivers through Democratic circles. If Kash runs, he's not just a wild card, he's a storm. And in Sacramento, Gavin Newsom looked into the mirror that night, the makeup removed, the lights off, and for the first time in his political career, whispered to himself the unthinkable: "Did I just get outclassed?" The Newsom team wasn't naive. They knew one bad debate could derail momentum, but they also knew media cycles were short, if they controlled the narrative. So 2 days after the Patel debacle, they launched their counteroffensive. It began with a morning press conference. Gavin appeared with sleeves rolled up, tieless, casual, but the tension in his jaw betrayed the act. He began not with a speech, but with a familiar deflection. "This week, we saw the rise of divisive voices who thrive on chaos instead of solutions." He didn't name Patel, but everyone knew. Then came the usual talking points: California's growth, climate policies, fighting extremism. His media handlers distributed glossy fact sheets to the press with carefully curated charts, headlines, and smiling stock photos. But there was a problem. No one was buying it. Reporters in the room, still high from the viral heat of the debate, weren't interested in scripted statistics. They wanted blood or redemption, and Newsom was giving them neither. "Governor," a Reuters journalist asked, "what's your response to critics saying you looked unprepared and evasive on stage?" Newsom flinched, but recovered. "We're not here to perform, we're here to govern. I'll leave the theater to others." It was meant to sound mature. Instead, it sounded hollow, because Americans had seen the debate. They had watched a man get called out fact by fact, not act by act, and they had seen him crack. As the press conference ended, a Fox News reporter shouted one final question: "Would you debate Kash Patel again? Live? No scripts?" Newsom didn't answer. He smiled, waved, and walked off. The moment went viral again. A still frame of his half-smile, half-panic look was captioned, "He knows better now." Meanwhile, Kash Patel said nothing. Instead, he posted a photo on social media from a VFW hall in Ohio, surrounded by veterans, sleeves rolled up, shaking hands, smiling. They matter more than cameras. That one post blew up, because it wasn't about performance anymore. It was about presence. And every attempt Newsom made to drag Patel into the swamp of political mudslinging backfired. Why? Because Patel wasn't playing that game. In D.C., whispers got louder. Conservative donors made quiet calls. Moderates leaned in. Podcasts speculated. If this guy runs for Senate or more, they're in trouble. And Gavin Newsom? He sat in a strategy meeting with advisors who tried to find someone else to blame. But deep down, he knew it wasn't the questions that beat him. It wasn't the format. It wasn't the moderator. It was Kash. The dust had settled, but the tremors hadn't stopped. A week after the debate, Kash Patel's name was no longer just whispered in conservative circles. It was headlining them. From Miami to Milwaukee, grassroots events began using his face on flyers, next to slogans like "unfiltered, unbought, unafraid." The shift was undeniable. He didn't hold office. He wasn't running. He didn't need to. Because what happened on that stage had become something bigger than a moment. It had become a signal that clarity, confidence, and conviction could still cut through the noise of American politics. Meanwhile, Gavin Newsom was in political purgatory. His team tried pushing new headlines, but none stuck. His flashy California achievements were drowned out by every replay of that one fateful line, "You don't lead California, you narrate it." The clip had been translated into multiple languages, circulating in online forums across Europe, Asia, even Africa. It wasn't just Americans who recognized the truth in Patel's delivery. It was anyone tired of politics as pageantry. The final blow came when CNN's own polling dropped. Who won the debate? Patel, 76%, Newsom, 18%, undecided, 6%. The headline beneath, "Unexpected star emerges from debate chaos." That was the polite way to say it, because behind the scenes, donors weren't just watching, they were pivoting. Phone calls increased. Former RNC officials reached out. Even center-right think tanks began floating his name. Patel for Senate? Future VP? A unifier in disguise? And Kash? He remained almost silent. No podcast tour, no gloating thread, just one video, walking with military families, thanking them, shaking hands. This country doesn't need noise. It needs direction. And Americans, exhausted by chaos and artifice, listened. Gavin Newsom, once propped as the Democratic Party's media darling, had tried to humiliate a man he thought would buckle under the spotlight, but instead, he created something far worse for himself. He built his opponent's platform, and Kash Patel stood on it, not yelling, not tweeting, but waiting. Calm, strategic, because when you win with facts and composure, the game doesn't just change, you become the game. In a world full of noise, one man chose facts over flair. While Gavin Newsom came to perform, Kash Patel came prepared. And when the lights faded, only one name echoed across America. Not the one who sought to humiliate, but the one who stood tall without flinching. This wasn't just a debate. It was a reckoning. And now, nothing will ever be the same again.